Stasiland. Chapter 27 then, Puzzlers. Let's get straight in with this one.
When I look back, I see Herr Koch has corralled the tourists and is giving them his side of history.
Just an overlap, bear with me.
Chapter 27. Puzzlers. I catch the train to Nuremberg. When I arrive, I drink an espresso standing up at a bar in the station. A beautiful young woman wearing a fast food wimple is serving behind the counter. The man next to me orders a Riesen Bockwurst. The barmaid reaches first for potato salad and a bun, and then the boiled sausage. Mustard or ketchup? She holds the paper plate high for an answer, reaching with her free hand above the bar to where the bottles would normally be, upturned for nips. Instead, there hangs a giant yellow rubber udder. The barmaid does a neat squeeze and twist action on one of the teats, milking it for mustard.
Yeah, so, again, quite a grotesque... Is it grotesque? I don't know. It's an unnatural image. Is it unnatural? Don't know, maybe it's natural. Milking an udder for mustard. That's unnatural, isn't it? That's not right. Have you ever seen those things? I've seen them in Germany. There's sort of Christmas markets, actually, and I've been to a couple of different German markets at Christmas time, and I've been to the one they have in Hyde Park as well. It's like a sort of a replica of a huge German market, and it's they have these sort of wooden log huts selling these sorts of food and chips and hot dogs and that sort of thing. But instead of having tomato sauce and ketchup, mustard bottles, they've got these great big, like rubber udders. These sort of red and yellow rubber udders with these like 4 or 5. I'm going to say teats, if you'll accept that phrase, where you just sort of squeeze the teat and out comes the tomato sauce or the mustard. It's an odd. I'm still hung up on upturned for nips. I'm not quite sure what she means by that. With her free hand above the part where the bottles would normally be, upturned for nips. I don't know what that means. Is it turned up? The bottles would normally be turned upside down to get the last dregs out of the bottle. I don't know. Anyway, probably that's best not to linger on this for too long. But it's certainly she's described it in an interesting way. It's almost zoomorphic. Well, it is zoomorphic because she's using the word udder, which is a very good word to use to describe it because they literally do look like rubber udders. It's sort of zoomorphic and a bit weird and a bit grotesque. I don't know. It shouldn't be grotesque, should it? I mean, we're drinking of milk. Well, some of us do. Anyway, let's move on.
Booking my ticket, I thought of Uwe and Scheller and our puzzle women conversation so long ago. I called Uwe at the television station to catch up and to tell him I've come full circle. A former colleague answered the phone. He said Uwe took a promotion to be roving correspondent in the United States and that he and Frederica and little Lucas were now happily ensconced in Washington. I asked him to pass on my best. The Stasi File Authority office where the puzzle women are housed is in Zirndorf, a village outside Nuremberg. The office is in the same walled compound where asylum seekers are being kept. 2 Ethiopians, or perhaps Eritreans, men with sad biblical faces and aimless arms, walk about the outdoor area.
So this is that cataphoric reference made back at the much earlier chapters about the puzzle women who are piecing together these shredded pieces of paper, these documents. And it's sort of been a bit of a narrative hook that was seeded right at the start, and it's now... we've now got the title of that chapter as Puzzlers, and so we know from the title that it's referring to the puzzle women that's been just alluded to without any details really up to this point. So it's been heading this way, and it gives the book a real sense of narrative progression. We've been waiting for this, and it gives us a sense of destination. Otherwise, if we think about the sequence and the structure of the book, it could be very rambly, and it is in places rambly, a bit like my commentaries, but the fact it has an overarching destination does give it some focus, and that's what she's doing now towards the end of the book by bringing it to a focus in the penultimate chapters.
The director, Herr Reyard, meets me at the entrance, and we go upstairs to his office. It is a plain administrative building that smells of floor wax and wet cardboard. Herr Reyard is a compact man with straight white hair to his shoulders and small glasses. He's an archivist. I'm nervous as a cat. I'm in an unaccountable hurry. I've been thinking about this place for so long as the focus of Miriam's hopes.
A cat's nervous? I don't know. It's an interesting simile, isn't it? Again, another zoomorphic simile, comparing herself to a cat. Not sure I would have thought of them being particularly nervous. I think it's been quite aloof creatures, really, but I don't know. Perhaps it's just an unusual simile to make us question and think about it in a different way and make that phrase highlight itself and be emphasised, perhaps. It certainly is a climactic point of the book because she's been heading here for so long.
I want there to be stainless steel benches and people wearing hairnets and white cloth gloves. I want security guards on the entrances and cameras in the workrooms. I want the completed puzzle pages to be scanned into computers, correlated to the files they belong to, and for the people they affect to be called up by sensitive trained personnel and informed about the new links in their lives.
So she gives us there an asynthetic list of things that she expects and wants to be happening. She's expecting an awful lot because of the impact this has had on people's lives. She's wanting sort of in the way of compensation for these people or atonement for these people. She wants detailed, thorough, comprehensive piecing together of these things. So that asynthetic list there just emphasises the extent of what she wants and what she expects and what she thinks is just and right for these people.
I want them to find out what happened to Charlie Weber. I am sure Herr Reyard has things to do, but his desk is uncluttered and he gives me the impression of having cleared the agenda for our meeting today. He is a quiet and unassuming man who made his career in the West German archives at Koblenz, and he is now looking forward to retirement. Yes, he says, I'll be 63 shortly, as if to say, I'm out of here. He tells me that this work started in 1995, after the sacks of material had sat around in Berlin for 5 years. 15,000 sacks were found at Normannenstrasse in January 1990. They contained shredded and hand-ripped files, index cards, photos and unwound tapes and film. Herr Reyard has arranged for me to take coffee with some of the workers. I am keen to meet the puzzle people. I ask him how many there are and whether they are all women, as I've heard. Oh no, he says, but there are probably more women than men. He is cautious and exact and asks his secretary to check the numbers. She comes back with a note. 18 women and 13 men. First, we go down the hall to see the workrooms. On the way, he tells me there has been some controversy because the victims want the work here to go more quickly. A computer program exists that could make this happen. It puts a lot of the pieces together very fast based on a scan of the exact shape of the ripped edge. But Herr Reyard says for the purposes of evidence, the documents reconstituted by computer do not count as originals. This doesn't make much sense to me, because generally people don't bring cases, they just want to know what happened in their lives. And it would be very expensive, he adds. That is more likely why it's not in use. The door opens onto an ordinary office. My eyes take in potted plants and old paint on the walls, and a poster of glassy-eyed kittens tangled in wool. There is a large desk with an empty chair behind it. Must be on a break, Herr Reyard says, gesturing towards the chair. But I'm only half listening. The window is wide open. A white curtain moves in the breeze, and I am panicked, my heart climbing steps up my chest, because on the desk there are masses and masses of tiny pieces of paper, some in small stacks, but others spread out all over. There are so many tatters of paper that the desk is not big enough, and the worker has started to lay them out on top of the filing cabinet as well. The pieces are different sizes, from 1/5 of an A4 page to only a couple of centimetres square, and there is nothing to stop them flying around the room and out of the window. Herr Reyard misreads my face. Yes, it's a lot of work, as you can see, he says. The next room is similar. This person, also on a break, seems to be sorting the material from the sacks, first into cut-off cardboard boxes, and then all over the desk. A woman's eye from a torn photograph looks out at me from one of the boxes. On the table I glimpse the name of the writer, Lutz Rathenau, on a shred of paper.
Just the woman's eye from a torn photograph looks out at me from one of the boxes. Obviously that's hyperbole and metaphor, really, isn't it? It's exaggerating the truth and perhaps using a metaphor there. The picture doesn't really look out at her, but it's personifying these images, it's making them seem more real and more alive. Because I suppose to Funda, these people, well, I mean, they are, or they were alive. These are the people she's interested in, so she wants to animate these people and bring them to life through their stories and through their history. So it's no coincidence that she's doing that here when she sees a picture on the desk.
There's a roll of double-sided sticky tape near the chair and a partially completed page in front of it, a corner and the left-hand edge. In the next room, the pieces are even smaller. It's painstaking work, Herr Reard says. The most pieces in one page so far has been 98. This person has nearly completed a sheaf of pages that rest in an open manila folder. The pages are all there, piled on top of each other except for a piece or pieces missing in the middle, making a neat whole. It takes brute strength to tear that many pages at once. Herr Reard shakes his head. That Stasi man would have hardly been able to move his fingers the next day. On the way to meet the workers, I ask Herr Reard about security. He tells me that everyone who works here, including the cleaning staff, is checked to make sure they have not had any involvement with the Stasi in the past, even though they are all Westerners. He says his workers are told not to speak about the content of the files they piece together. Sometimes this needs to be stressed. If they find, say, a file on an important West German politician, then I'll go in and have a word and remind them not to mention it at all, he says. I ask about electronic surveillance of the rooms, because I imagine there are people out there who would pay a high price to stop some of this information coming to light. No, Herr Reard says. Sometimes they sit two to a room, but that's more to alleviate boredom than anything else. And I make sure I put the alarm on when I leave of an evening. This is not what I expected. It is friendly and small and low-key. It is something between a hobby farm for jigsaw enthusiasts and a sheltered workshop for obsessives.
Classic funder. She's comparing it to jigsaw enthusiasts, which is a very fitting idea, isn't it? A fitting metaphor there to use, because they are there. Well, it is a puzzle, isn't it? It's like they're putting pieces together, and it is like a jigsaw, but sort of makes it seem ludicrous and laughable and absurd. Which, of course, it is absurd. I mean, it's the whole process. It's mad that this would be a thing that would happen, and not only that it happened in the first place, the Stasi collecting the information, but that then years later, other people would then sit painstakingly piecing things back together again. It's just absurd.
Herr Reard introduces me and leaves. There are 3 women and 2 men sitting at a table with fruit juice, biscuits and a thermos of coffee on it. They have left room for me at the head of the table. The 2 women on my right are both plump, made up and middle-aged. On my left there's a young woman with freckles and shoulder-length dark hair. Next to her a small brown-haired man with glasses, and at the end a large, gentle-looking fellow with fair hair and eyes as blue as marbles. I ask them how they go about their work each day. The furthest middle-aged woman says, "It's really just like a puzzle at home."
So, before we get too much further, the description of people there, the puzzlers, the puzzle women and the puzzle men, again, not particularly flattering. Plump, made up and middle-aged. I don't know if there's any incrementum in that or any bathos. Probably not. I think, but it's interesting that she sort of makes a point of mentioning the fact they're made up and have makeup on. And then young woman with freckles, shoulder-length dark hair, a small brown-haired man with glasses, a large, gentle-looking fellow with fair hair and eyes as blue as marbles. She's used that before. I think that's similarly comparing eyes to marbles before. That's quite positive, I think, isn't it? I mean, that's quite, I don't know, like blue marbles. That's quite a flattering image, I imagine. So it's for Funder, this is fairly nice. And I think she perhaps sympathises with these people because they're sitting there day after day doing what is a maddening, tiring job of piecing all these things together.
You start with the corners and fill in the rest from the shape of the edges. We get clues too from the sort of paper it is, the typeface or handwriting and so on. "Do you do puzzles at home?" I ask her. "Yes," she says. "I must be crazy." They all laugh. The woman next to her started here only 2 months ago. She has painted nails and a gap between her 2 front teeth. So
again, talking about makeup, sort of the idea of synthetic additions to people's appearance, painted nails, but then, and this is bathos, a gap between her 2 front teeth. So we've got the painted nails, which is, I guess, a flattering, positive thing, and then undermined by the gap in her 2 front teeth.
They opened a sack to show me, and I saw the really tiny pieces inside, and I thought, oh my God, I can't do that. The sacks are over 1 metre tall and paunchy as a person. But every sack is different, she says, and I have to say there are things that are interesting. The dark man appears to be the most senior person here. He has deep-set eyes and a calm voice. The others listen closely when he speaks. He says, Sometimes the satisfaction is in knowing that when people find out what happened to them, it might give them some peace of mind. Why they lost their place at the university, or what happened to the uncle who disappeared or whatever. It gives those affected an insight into their own lives. The others pour coffee and pass long-life milk down the table. I imagine getting more news about myself from a file. You would come to think of your past as a landscape you travelled through without noticing the signs. I think at the end, the Stasi had so much information, the fair man says, that they thought everyone was an enemy, because everyone was under observation. I don't think they knew who was for them or against, or whether everyone was just shutting up. He is shy and looks at his hands, closed around his coffee mug when he speaks. When I find a file where they've been watching a family in their living room for 20 years, I ask myself, what sort of people are they who want all this knowledge for themselves? Are you moved by what you find sometimes? I ask. The young woman answers, when I find love letters, I think, good grief, they really opened everything. And how many hands did these pass through? How many times were they copied? I'd hate for that to have happened to me. I don't feel too good about seeing them myself when I piece them together. The dark man says he is most shocked by how the Stasi used people's own distress against them. When they were in prison, for instance, offering to let them out on condition that they spy for the Stasi. I think of Koch's father having to change political parties or be exiled to a Russian camp, or Frau Paul, who could have been bait in a trap to catch a Westerner, and even of Julia, imprisoned in her country and offered freedom within it only if she would inform on the people in her life. I think of the generational cycles of tragedy the Germans have been inflicting on themselves. But this is not about the individuals, the dark man continues. It is about a system that so manipulated people that it drove them to do these things. It shows how people can be used against one another. I'm reluctant to condemn them because the Stasi were also manipulated. They too needed jobs. The others are nodding. On the other hand, he says, there were lots of people who just said no. Not everyone can be bought. He tells of an engineer who refused to inform. And nothing more happened to him. The file was simply closed. I am reminded of the story of a factory worker who, after she was approached to inform, announced loudly the next day at the canteen table, "Guess what? You wouldn't credit it, but they think me so reliable that I've been asked to inform." Her cover blown, she was useless, and she was left alone. The young woman says, I think there were advantages over there that we forget, particularly for mothers and children. I'm a single mum and I know what I'm talking about. I had to work and it was hard to find a kindergarten place. I have a friend who lived over there and she says she didn't want for anything. And the rents were lower, the gap-toothed woman on my right adds. The kindergartens were there, the dark man says, because they wanted to get the children early to bring them up loyal to the state. Sure, the young mother says, but it all became crudely clear to me just after the wall came down. I met a couple in the street who'd just come over from the east and had no money and nowhere to go, so I said they could stay with me. They were with me for a weekend and I showed them around. We went to Karstadt department store and looked in the food section. They were beside themselves. How many kinds of ketchup do you have? They said as they looked at the shelves. Then I thought to myself, it really is too much. There must be a middle way. Do we really need 30 different kinds of ham and 15 different kinds of ketchup? The mistake the GDR made was to force people into a position, the dark man says. Either you are for us or an enemy. And if you then came to think of yourself as an enemy, you had to ask yourself, what am I doing here? They wanted to put everything into their narrow scheme, but life simply didn't fit into it. He pauses, and the others wait for him to finish. But I think we need to remember that they came here for the freedom, not for 15 kinds of ketchup. Herr Reard sees me out. I check with him what the consequences were when someone who had been approached to inform either told people about it or flatly refused.
Just backing up a little bit to the ketchup reference here. I mean, that's bathos, isn't it, in a way? Because the point he's making is a very good one. That I mean, she's talking about the fact that it's excessive, and it makes her realise how excessive the capitalism of the West is, and the fact that people have freedom and choice and a free trade market and free options for to have 15 kinds of ketchup or 15 kinds of anything, whatever it might be, commodities. Whereas in a communist state, of course, you would have ketchup, you would have one product, and that would be whatever it might be. So, but of course, that's just symbolic. That's just one aspect, and I suppose you could argue that was a synecdoche for for capitalism. So the 15 kinds of ketchup is the synecdoche for capitalism. And people like von Schnitzler, is that called von Schnitzler? Would have seen that as being grossly decadent and luxurious and corrupt. So it's been brought back down to just ketchup when really it's more than that. And as he says, people came to the West for freedom, not for the 15 kinds of ketchup. But of course, the two are linked. There's only that much choice because there's freedom. So it seems like a very ridiculous and silly point to make, but actually there's more to that than meets the eye, I think, if you look at that. So there's use of bathos by finishing that paragraph with bringing it back to ketchup. But actually it's symbolic of something much bigger.
There really were no consequences, he says. That was the thing. The file was just closed, marked deconspiriert. But of course, he adds, no one could know at the time that nothing would happen to him, so hardly anyone refused. We have reached the door. He says, there is something I need to give you. Without a word, he passes me a photocopied sheet of paper with some writing on it. It is a copy of a memo he wrote. Stasi File Authority, Project Group Reconstruction. Time required for reconstruction. 1 worker reconstructs on average per day 10 pages. 40 workers reconstruct on average per day 400 pages. 40 workers reconstruct on average in a year of 250 working days 100,000 pages. There are, on average, 2,500 pages in one sack. 100,000 pages amounts to 40 sacks per year. In all, at the Stasi File Authority, there are 15,000 sacks. This means that to reconstruct everything, it would take 40 workers 375 years. I am speechless. I can only understand this as a small paper protest. Herr Reard points at the page. These are the figures for 40 workers, he says. As you see, we only have 31. He is telling me in his quiet way that the resources United Germany is throwing at this part of reconstructing the lives of its former East German citizens are pitiful. Some kind of Sisyphean joke. What he is running here is an almost totally symbolic act. Herr Reard has organised a driver to take me from Zerndorf back to Nuremberg. The day is a clear, sunny blue. Away from the asylum seekers and scraps of paper, everything is bright and cheerful. I look out the window, thinking about Miriam and her hopes that the torn-apart pieces of her life will be put back together in those airy rooms, sometime in the next 375 years.
Okay, so obviously the numerical lexis here is designed to shock us, and the use of incrementum here as well. Now, this is obviously in his Herr Relard's memo, the way it increases to ultimately end up with the idea that it'll take 375 years to piece everything back together, which of course is impossible and absurd. And so he's making the point that actually the resources going into this are really inadequate, woefully inadequate, in fact. And that nice reference to Sisyphus there, Sisyphean joke, from Greek mythology, you might know the punishment that Sisyphus had to suffer was to roll a giant boulder up a hill, and when he got to the top, the boulder rolled back down again and start all over again. So it's kind of endless, tedious, time-consuming task, a life's work, really, completely pointless. So using that Greek, that exophoric reference there to Sisyphus from Greek mythology. And I think that's probably it, really. Oh, and then we're back out again into the daylight. The day is a clear, sunny blue. We're back to the natural again. Away from the asylum seekers and scraps of paper. Everything is bright and cheerful. So she's juxtaposed the internal machinations of this, the puzzlers and their program, with the more natural imagery from outside being bright and cheerful. And the hendiadys there, of course, of bright and cheerful, both being similar words, similar phrases. And then she's extending the metaphor of the torn apart pieces of Miriam's life will be put back together in those airy rooms sometime in the next 375 years. So there's ridicule and absurdity there, but the torn apart is quite a fitting metaphor, given that these pieces of paper are torn apart, but her life has literally been torn apart too. So that's quite a poignant and significant way to end this penultimate chapter. And then, next episode, chapter 28, the last one. My word, can you believe it?